Welcome to the Payments Association's Insights podcast. In this edition, our focus is on digital accessibility in payments. My name is Kerry Bircham, and I'm a lawyer at Burgess Salmon in the financial services team. I'm also a member of the Payments Association's ESG working group, along with Emily, Miranda, and Peter, who I'd like to invite to introduce themselves. Miranda?
Hi, so I'm Miranda McLean. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at EconPay. EconPay is a global payment solutions provider regulated in the UK and Europe. We're a payment gateway and we offer global and local acquiring, payment processing and orchestration through a single platform and API. Our mission is to achieve ultimate financial inclusivity, and that extends to ensuring that the services that we offer to our merchants are accessible to their end customers.
Thank you. Emily?
Hi, I'm Emily Carlson. I lead the digital accessibility team at KPMG in the UK, which is one of the big professional services firms. My team is mostly responsible for making sure that all of the internal technology that we give to our colleagues to use is fully accessible, and to some extent, we also support our clients in building accessible products.
Thank you. And Peter?
Hi, my name is Pete Britnell. I'm Chief Product Officer at Hassel Inclusion. We help organizations get mature around digital accessibility. Previously, I've been involved in business consulting, and my apology is that for years I advised people about IT strategy and had no idea about digital accessibility. And in the last 5 years, realized how it helps people extend the reach of their products, gets people to do what they want to do in their normal life, and really makes a difference for so many people on this planet.
That's a great segue into our discussion then on digital accessibility, why it matters in the payments sector, and what more can be done to make payments products and payment services more accessible to more consumers. So there are a number of linked and related, just to set the sort of legal scene here, upcoming, existing regulatory requirements that require and will require, as more of these requirements emerge, payments firms to ensure that their digital services enable good outcomes for all of their customers, very much recognizing here that for customers and consumers, one size does not fit all. And although these regulatory initiatives are coming from different jurisdictions and different bodies, they all drive very much at the same end goal, which is removing barriers for those who are locked out of and underserved by the financial services system, and enabling wider access to financial services by driving initiatives around inclusive design, innovation, reimagining traditional financial services. And significantly, I think a lot of this change is being driven by communities who are joined together by lived experiences of being closed out of what many of us consider to be normal financial services. So let's dive into some discussion points. Starting with you, Emily, could you answer or provide your insights into what you consider to be digital accessibility and why it's important?
Yeah, absolutely. So what is digital accessibility is a really big question because it touches a lot of different things. And I think we'll get into some of our case studies and examples that hopefully will shed a bit more light on it. To talk about why it's important is really interesting. And I'll start maybe with some of the numbers to set the scene. So talking about the UK, it depends what source you're looking at, but we usually say about 20 to 25% of the UK population has a disability or identifies as having a disability. So that is a huge amount off the bat. That's anywhere from 1 in 5 to 1 in 4 people. Then if we think about my next favorite kind of statistic is that of those people that have a disability, about 80% were not born with that disability. They developed it over their working life. To me, I really like that statistic because we often see disability as kind of static, like you're either disabled or you're not disabled. And really, that's completely wrong. People develop disabilities over their lifetime. Most people will experience disability at some point in their life. So we can talk about the 20-25%, but actually, we're probably talking more about 100% because we will all experience it, and disability can and will affect all of us. Then you get into the really interesting conversations about the commercial value you. One of the interesting facts that we like to talk about is that 70% of websites are inaccessible. And when you think about 70% of websites that a huge amount of this population can't use, that has a lot of commercial implication.
Miranda?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, for me, accessibility isn't just about the compliance piece that you've spoken about. It's about creating products and experiences that are accessible to everybody and that they work for everybody. And we see multiple examples in everyday life of businesses being inaccessible, from things like unreadable PDFs, unclear signage, and, from our perspective in payments, inaccessible checkout flows. We talk about there being this huge commercial opportunity. I think that's absolutely right. The purple pound in the UK is worth 274 billion. And just to clarify what the purple pound is, for those that don't know that term, it's the collective spending power that people with disabilities have. And this extends not only to those people with disabilities, but also to their friends and family. So that number is actually likely to be far, far bigger. So for businesses ignoring this market, they are leaving a huge commercial opportunity on the table. Disabled customers are also your most loyal customers. Why? Well, as Emily mentioned, 70% of websites are inaccessible, but 71% of disabled users will leave a website that's inaccessible. So when they do actually find one that works for them, they're going to stick with it, tell all their friends and family about it, because it takes them so long to find one that actually works. So yeah, these are like huge considerations, and there is a massive commercial impact for businesses ignoring it.
Thank you, Pete.
And I just want to build on that around it's a positive thing for an organization. Most people, I just want to book a holiday. I just want to buy some Christmas presents. And if I can't get my payment to work, then I go somewhere else. And that is a loss for the organization. TUI is a hospitality and holiday company, and they did some research and they found that people with disabilities booked earlier, spent more people went on holiday with them, they spent more on the holiday, and they came back again. And so loyalty, basket size, all those things are just what organizations want. So it's not an edge case, it's actually a core case. It is 20 to 25% of your customers. And if you're missing those now, then actually there's a huge opportunity to grab them. And I think there's another element to digital accessibility, and that's thinking about both the experience and compliance. So there's two things to remember around compliance. There is a standard called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Most organizations are following a version of that standard. So you may hear a thing called WCAG 2.2. If your organization is following that, that's great. And that's a bit like spelling and grammar check if you're writing a novel. It's important, but it's not everything. And then there's another standard out there. There's an ISO standard, which is 30071-1, which is all about policies, governance, and processes. So you're getting the way you're doing it right. And then the imagination you put on top is how do you serve your customers? And if you think about that first, how do I serve somebody who can't see very well, somebody who can't move their arms as well as other people, somebody who can't hear well, you may well have something very innovative that you put in place. So it's not an edge case, it's a core case.
Thank you. Let's move on then to look at implementing digital accessibility. So a good place to start is how to start and some of the pain points that businesses might meet when they start on this journey. Pete, can I come back to you?
Sure. Pain points is actually looking at your process and looking at the end-to-end process. There are organizations who are working really, really hard with this, and they're getting, say, their mobile app working, but it fits in the ecosystem of marketing, emails, the app, the post conversations, what happens if something goes wrong. And you need all of that to work, and not, well, I'm going to be on the desktop for a bit of it, mobile here, then WhatsApp, then something else, then another chat, because that makes it really complicated for the user. So a good start is to look at your process and say, where could we be failing? Where are the drop-off points? And how do we fix that? So there are traditional audits that look at the page, then there's sort of experience level or live audits that look at the process. That's a really good way to start looking at it. Because if everything works and then you can't pay, you're stuffed.
Yeah. Emily?
Yeah, I can give an example of an internal product that we worked on. And I think it doesn't encompass, like you said, you need to see the whole process. But if you're working just on a product, what we did that I think is a really good way to approach it is we had a product that was built for our internal audit capability to use. It was built on a number of different platforms, some of the big Microsoft and Databricks and all those different things. And it had a lot to it. It had dashboards, it had form fields, it was an application in its own right that people would be using day in and day out. And I think the team took the absolute right approach where they engaged us really early on. We looked at the design of the product. We gave feedback on all, like we were saying, the WCAG criteria that are relevant there, like color contrast, the size of buttons. As they developed it, we continued testing it. We tested it at every stage to make sure, again, it conformed to all of those different standards. Where we found issues, we either fed them back to some of these vendors like Microsoft if there was an issue with the platform that we were building on, and if there were things that we could fix, we certainly tried to. If there was anything we really struggled with, we put it on our roadmap to make sure that it was addressed in the future. And I think we've ended up with a pretty good product. And I think the next step that we try to do, that we're not there yet with this one particularly, is then to actually engage the people that use it. Because I think, like you said, Peter, you can hit all of the technical criteria, but then is it actually usable? Is it actually a really good experience for someone? That's not always really clear. So engaging with your users, especially your users with disabilities, to make sure that they're actually able to use it in the way that you intend is the kind of golden final step.
Yeah.
So let's move on then to look at some more case studies like that one and some real examples that have been driven by lived experience. Miranda, can I come to you?
Yeah, sure. So at EconPay, we rebranded the business last year, and we did it with an accessibility-first mindset. What does that mean? That we worked really closely with our brand agency to ensure the colours that we were selecting were accessible, the fonts that we were using. We rebuilt the website from scratch, again, to the WCAG guidelines, and we also rebuilt our hosted payments pages, our checkout pages, also according to those guidelines. But a key learning, as Emily just pointed out, was that following those guidelines doesn't actually mean that your website and your product pages are accessible. We worked with the Digital Accessibility Centre, and they underwent really rigorous testing with us. And they test our website and our product pages against more than 17 different disabilities with people with those disabilities. So there was a lot of back and forth actually with them and us to ensure that we made the fixes that they'd suggest, and we'd go back and they'd retest and they'd come back again and so on. So this has gone on for a little while, but now we've finally fixed everything. And so we've now achieved the Digital Accessibility Centre certification. So that's good news, but it's not a one and done job. You have to continue the testing year in, year out. You don't just get the certificate and then you can do whatever you like. So that's going to be an ongoing commitment from us and the business. And then in addition, part of ensuring that we continue to deliver inclusive products and services and that we keep that top of mind, we've also run mandatory training internally around accessibility. So our teams have all been through neurodiversity training. We've opened that up also to our merchants so they can access that training. We're running training such as internal hiring, inclusive hiring practices for businesses. We've also launched an accessibility pack for our merchants to help them think about accessibility and see how they can embed accessibility throughout their processes. These are all things we've done. We've also ensured that we're part of the Disability Confidence Scheme, and we've just recently achieved the RNIB's Visibly Better Employer standard as well.
Awesome. Would either of you like to add anything? Sorry to cut you off.
That's all right.
So I just wanted to share another story about how organizations have gone beyond compliance. So we did some work with Monzo around a live audit, and they were looking at the verification process. So how do you prove who you are? And they realized that one of the things you need to do is take a photograph of yourself. But if you're blind, you can't see yourself in the app. So it would have passed all the accessibility compliance list, but you still couldn't do the job. So they had to put some haptic feedback, some buzzing and movement in the phone, and some sound to tell you that your face was in the space for them to take a photograph. And then that made the number of errors drop, made it much easier for people who are blind to actually verify their identity. And because they thought differently and through the experience, they got a much better product than just, hey, it's fine, it ticks some boxes.
That's amazing, but it really drives home how important it is to engage with the user.
Absolutely. And actually thinking first off about it, because if you don't do that, it becomes a cost. And in design, you want to think it through. There's a lot of tools in Figma and add-ons for the techie team to look at getting it right before you start building. Because when you do an audit, you want the audit to be a confirmation. You don't want the audit to be a surprise.
Or a rewrite.
Exactly. And so that's the big thing. How do we give enough support, tools, and investment really early in the design so that you don't have any problems, rather than we've got emergency funding that we've got to now fix all these errors that came up and we're now delayed. And we've had clients come back to us and say, we had a 3-month project, we're in month 9 of it because we didn't get accessibility right. And that means we're missing customers. And so we need to get it right. So put it into design, put it really early on, and think about the user experience as you design, rather than I'll just make it work for people with disability afterwards. What would be different if you designed for disability at the start?
Emily, do you want to add anything there?
No, just to echo that, I think that is kind of a natural progression for a lot of organizations where they start with it at the very end. It's like, okay, now the QA testers can do accessibility testing right before go live, and then they find a whole host of issues, and half the time you can't even address them, and sometimes products just go live with those issues. So yeah, bringing it to the forefront and also making sure you have the internal knowledge to actually do it, because I think a lot of times it gets put on designers or developers, and actually the education of accessibility in universities and for people coming into the workforce is not great yet, and people don't know how to make things accessible.
So let's finish then with some takeaways, some practical tips that we can drive at listeners who might be thinking about starting to make change now. Miranda, let me start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, make a start. Accessibility sounds like a huge undertaking, but you can make it, small but impactful changes incrementally, and they don't have to be expensive. I think people can start with an accessibility audit of their own websites to understand if they meet those standards. And they can start by setting some meaningful metrics that they can commit to, because, we all know that what gets measured gets managed.
Pete?
I want to build on that. The audits for compliance, absolutely see where your gaps are. It gives you a plan to change, but also looking at your process governance. So you're building it in to fix for the future as well. And there's an ISO standard around that. Use that as a metric for maturity. So you're helping the people, like you were saying, about training, about building capability and understanding, and not just fixing a website. Thank you.
Emily?
Yeah, I think maybe to build off of what both of you said, it's hard to come up with a third takeaway.
I'm going to come up with a fourth.
I hope I don't steal yours then. I think another good one is just to go to your organization and see where the responsibility for accessibility lies, because you need someone who is responsible and accountable for it at the end of the day. We have a saying in KPMG that accessibility is everyone's business, which is absolutely true, because everyone needs to consider it in their role. But there's also danger that if it's everyone's responsibility, it's no one's at the end of the day. And if you're running audits, if you're looking at your processes, you need someone who's overseeing that and can actually be held accountable and do something about it.
Brilliant. And I think my final sort of takeaway to wrap up, having listened to all of that, is I sometimes hear in my role, it's another cost of compliance. It's more regulation that we have to spend time and money getting right. But I think what's really come out of this is the huge number of lives that are impacted by small changes for the better, the huge amount of collective spending power that we're talking about here, and that there is commercial opportunity for payments and other businesses in getting this right. So thank you, Emily. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Miranda, for joining the Payments Association today.
Thank
you
you
very
Thank you
much.
for having us.
To access more podcasts, videos, and articles, go to thepaymentsassociation.org.